Hey guys, Chelsea here. Now there are 5 campaigns in Enlisted, and most people, argue which one's the most balanced. Like, I know there was a poll Quadro did a while back, and honestly, I'm gonna give my 2 cents on this. I'm gonna basically rank each of the 5 campaigns from in order of what's the most balanced. Now, the way I'm gonna the way I'm gonna rank these is that I'm gonna go. Basically, number 5 is the least balanced, and number 1 is the most balanced, in my opinion. Now, obviously, this is my opinion, so if you have a different opinion, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. However, I am going to say, as this is my opinion, I am going to give why I think this is, and honestly, I'm not going to be taking into account stuff like player-based issues. If that was the case, Tunisia would be right at the bottom, as no one plays Axis Tunisia, let's face it. And so I'm not going to be taking any player-based issues, I'm not going to be taking anything like that. This is going to be entirely just the unlocks in the campaign. How well they progress, and more or less how both sides progress in terms of power. So, the way it works, if a campaign is constantly, gradually just having, basically, I'm just going to be judging it on 3 criteria. It's vehicle, so the tanks, the planes, and the infantry equipment. If one side, if all 3 are going in in the same, basically, parallel lines, then it would be considered a balanced campaign. If one starts going, skew with in one area, but the other side goes in another skew with in another area, that's still pretty balanced. If it's cut, as long as there's a bit of a balance between the 3, and it really depends, really. So you'll see what I mean. Also, I just want to say I've got a Discord if you guys want to check it out. If you guys want to, it's probably the easiest way you can actually talk to me outside of YouTube comments. It's I play a lot of Enlisted. I play quite a bit with the community. We joke a lot, and it's just a fun time. Anyways, that being said, let's go on to what I think is the least balanced campaign and work our way forward. Coming in at number 5, and absolutely no shock to no one in particular, it's Berlin. Yeah, just, was this any indication? The Axis gets so hammered by everything in the early game. And even in the later game, the Allies are just dominant. So, first off, we'll just talk about the early game, okay? In the early game, the Allies get much better SMGs with the PPSs over the MP308, which is awful, and the MP40. The MP40 is alright, but it's do you really... is the MP40 as good as a PPS 43? Not really. You also get stuff like the IL-2, which is on par with the Stuka, in my opinion. You get the T-34 with the 85mm compared to a Panzer IV-J. And you just get a lot of other stuff. The only thing I think that the Axis actually do better is that the Axis have the Volkssturmgewehr and the Gewehr 43, which I think are better than the bolt-action counterparts for the Volkssturmgewehr. And the Gewehr 43 is just much better than the Allies, than the Soviet counterpart, which I believe is the SVT. But then it just gets better. But then the Soviets just get better and better as the campaign progresses. You get the PPD here, the DPM, which is pretty decent, but yeah. You get the PPSH with the box, while the Axis get get something else. And the Axis get stuff like, for example, the Volkssturmgewehr, while the Soviets get a drum Mac. And it does and even with the FG, you might be like, oh, but what about the FG? The Soviets get the AVS. The AVS is just as powerful as the FG. And then they get the AVT, which is just as powerful, in fact, I'd argue that the AVS is more powerful than the FG. I would even argue that. Yeah, I'm actually going to say it. The AVS is better than the FG-42 in this game. And the Soviets also get the AVT, which is, it's worse. It's pretty much the exact same thing. Same with the FG2. PPSH as well versus a Beretta. And the Beretta is really good, but it's like pales. Oh yeah, and also they got the same Moscow trick of the Soviets had the same trick in Moscow where their sniper, their second sniper, is a semi-auto, and the Axis' second sniper is a Kar 98. And now this isn't the only campaign that does this. There are other campaigns that do this, but it's like I just wanted to point that out as well. And really, like, you might be like, oh, but what about the MP43? The Soviets get the FA, the FA. Oh, what about the Sniper STG? They get the Sniper AVS. Oh, what about the Koenigsegg? They get the IS-2. What about the Tiger? They get the IS-1. It's like everything the Soviets have, they just have one which is not as, maybe not better, but still up to the standard. And they get more stuff. I've said, if you watched my old videos where I was talking about the, you know, where I was ranking each faction from, like, which is the most powerful, the Soviets in Berlin have been consistently the most powerful. In fact, at one stage, the Axis in Berlin was bottom of the pack. And, yeah, this is why Berlin is the most unbalanced campaign. Now, I will say, though, that at the hands of a good player, you can dominate. Like, I've beaten good players who are using, you know, PPSHs and the AS squads with the MP40. Mostly because I did tactical leaning, but yeah. Other than that, it's just really it's just really unbalanced, and it's why, in my opinion, it's coming in at number 5, and I think everyone is expecting this to come in at number 5. Oh, and also, for good measure, even if you look at the premium squads, the Soviets have it better. With the PPD 40 squad here, which is a free PPD early, you get another drum mag here, and you get the AS 44, which is pretty good. The SEG 45 is, I don't know, and I mean the Gurat squad is basically a 9-man death company. But like this is basically a 9-man with the AVT. And I mean, I would say the PPD is much better than the 40-1. I mean, the 40-1 is cool and all, but yeah. Oh yeah, and also the Panzer IV as well just sucks. But yeah, that being said, let's move on to number 4. Now, this one will be probably the most controversial. Moscow being the second most unbalanced campaign. And here's why. And here is exactly why. I'm just going to go to the exact level. Level 11. This is when the campaign becomes unbalanced. First 10 levels, I'll agree. It's the most balanced campaign. Level 11 onwards, for both sides, no. The Soviets just get much more. They just get much more. PPD with a drum mag. Yeah, it's a PPD 30, 34, 38, but that's still a drum mag. What did they get after this? The Winchester. Also, they get a complete the BT7, whereas the Axis get a Panzer IV-E, the Panzer III-E, which isn't even that good. Like, the 3E isn't even that good. The Panzer III isn't good in general. But yeah, the Soviets get a pretty good tank, the BT7. They also get the Winchester. They get an early sniper with the scope. And they also get, stuff like that. And then they've just got much better tanks. The T-26, the T-34. By the time the Axis get, as well as that, by the time the Axis get an actual semi-automatic sniper rifle, or something that's not a bolt action, level 31, the Allies already have 2. Like, I'm just going to go into logistics. They will already have 2, and then they unlock another one with the AVS. With the sniper AVS. Also, AVS, which I've said is more powerful than the PPSH. Not the PPSH, more powerful than the FG-42. It's probably more powerful than the PPSH as well. It's more overpowered than the PPSH. Speaking of PPSH and DT-29, which is just much better than any of the Axis weapons. PTRS, which is the best anti-tank rifle. And they also... And I haven't even talked about the elephant in the room. That is the T-34. Like... I mean, there's a reason why the T-34 was... And do you know what the Axis get to counter it? A Stug? A Panzer IV? Maybe even a Catch T-34? No. They get a Panzer IIIJ that you've already unlocked. Yeah. No, just... Yeah, honestly, for everyone who's saying, oh, but, you know, it's the most balanced campaign, look through it. Would you... Okay, let's take a comparison. What's more powerful? A Bretta Model 38 with a 20-round box magazine, or a PPSH 41 with a 71 drum. Okay? If you had a choice between the two, which one would you pick? Okay, or if you had a choice between an MP40 or a PPD with a drum, or the KH or the ZK29 and the AVS. You see what I mean? You get so... This campaign is so unbalanced at times, and honestly, the fact that people defend it, saying, "Oh, it's the most balanced campaign," is actually kind of sad. It's like, are we playing the same campaign here? It's like, it's probably the most unbalanced. In fact, the only reason it's not number one is because the Berlin is so stacked in favour of the Soviets that, you know, that it's pretty much, you know, it's impossible to not have that as number one. Whereas this one is kind of, yeah, there's a lot, there's you know, more powerful Soviets, but it's not like a big, huge deal until you get to level 11, where it basically becomes... It's more of a gradual push towards the Soviets being OP. Like, it starts off small, then it just gets more and more, and it becomes even more egregious. Which is why, in my opinion, it's coming in... And even here, the SVT is much better than the Gavir 41. Like, no question. And they just get so much more better, you know, better everything. Which is why it's easily coming in at number 4 for the most, you know, for the balanced faction. Like, I know everyone says Moscow most balanced faction. It's not. It's not anymore. Stuff like the PPSH and the AVS and other weapons have just nuked that balance. Which is why it's coming in at number 4. Anyways, let's move into number 3. Now, this one was quite difficult because, really, Stalingrad just really depends. If you pay, then I can understand probably having this at bottom. Because, let's just face it, it's more or less if you pay. So I'm going to take this into the perspective of a paying player. So if you pay for this, you know, you're going to get to level 28 almost immediately. While someone who doesn't pay, who's like free to play at the same time, probably plays the same amount of games, gets the same amount of XP as you, will probably be about level 8. Will probably be about level 8. So you've already got that. But there's a little bit of reasons why I think Stalingrad is a lot more balanced. Now, the main thing is the Soviets don't actually dominate on the ground in this one, but they have better tanks. Now, this is important because Stalingrad really, you know, the Germans actually are much better on the ground for once. And there's a few reasons for that. They've got the Korali, they've got the 717, and critically they have the MKB. Now, the MKB is a very good weapon, and it was, honestly, if it wasn't for the MKB being as powerful as it is, I would actually have this maybe even at number 1. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. The MKB being more powerful, being as powerful as it is, and of course the paid nature kept it below this. But other than that, it's actually probably like if it was something like obviously the AVT here, which I mean, it's the AVT, but the fact and I'm kind of happy that the AVT is locked behind engineers. But the problem is that so's the MKB. So engineers for the Axis are going to be much better equipped, much more well equipped than ones for the Soviets. Because the Soviet ones are going to have, the engineers are going to have max, AVT, whereas the Axis get the MKB, and the MKB is really good. Not the best, probably the worst of the assault rifles in the game, but up there, it's still a pretty good assault rifle. It's still a 10 out of 10 weapon. Obviously, of course, you got the 717 and the PPSH, which, of course, on both sides. So basically, they cancel each other out. So, yeah, I think it's fine. But, again, one bad choice for weapons and the full Axis kept it at... I had to put it at essentially the centre, which is, fair, I guess. Anyways, let's move on to number 2. Remember when I said in the beginning that I wasn't taking into account player-based death? So having a dead player base will not mean that the faction in question will not be rock bottom. Well, Tunisia is that campaign. Coming in at number 2 is Tunisia. Now, Tunisia is really balanced, okay? It's really fucking balanced. Now, most people say Tunisia Axis is a death grump, but the only reason it is because no one plays it, and lots of people play with the Allies. Now, the thing is, Axis Tunisia actually has one of the best Axis loadouts. You've got good SMGs, the Beretta M1, the MP40, the OVP, 2 Beretta Model 38s. You've got some good bolt actions at the start, especially this Carcano here. The Carcano Model 38 with the 7.35mm rounds are really good. You get the ZH-29 later. You get this Carcano is a really good sniper. You get the other Gavir, whatever it's called, the spaghetti gun. And you get the MG. You do get the MG34. It's kind of weak when it comes to with the machine guns. Like the MG34 is good, but if you saw my last video, you know my feelings on it. And stuff like the Bushel and the they're fine, I guess. And yeah, the only thing that really is bad is that the Allies get the Thompson here, and that's the only if this Thompson didn't exist, or it was up against something which was of equal skill level, of equal to it, like let's say this was in Normandy and it went up against the MP43, then maybe I would say it would be a lot more balanced. But even then, the Axis have a lot that handles it. Now, you might be saying, but what about the Allies having much better air and tanks? Which is true. The Allies do have better air and they have better tanks. Especially the Grant and especially the SBD. But the Axis do not slouch when it comes to aircraft. They've got a Stuka, which is a decent Stuka. They've got Focke-Wulf, which immediately is pretty good, because those Focke-Wulf 190s are really good. They have some decent, they've got some decent tanks. They got the Panzer III-J, they've got a later Panzer IV-F2, and they've got some decent stuff here and there, but I think what most people don't like is the fact that there's just nothing, you just don't have many players, which, it's fair. And obviously, of course, most people are turned off by the fact that the engineers are level 9s, which, by the way, pro tip, there is actually a gold order troop here, which is an engineer 2. You can get this almost immediately. Worth it. It's a current gold order. I've got it for the Allies, so So basically, it means that you can get an early engineer. So if you're going to start Tunisia, do that. If you have a gold order, it'll make your life so much easier. And because they're engineers, they start out with very good stats. You can see here, like 18, 20, 16, pretty good. Anyways, other than that, like most allies, Tunisia's just really good. Like it's pretty well balanced. Other than a couple minor hiccups here and there, like the Grant and the Thompson, it's mostly well balanced. Now, yeah, I do admit the Grant is a bit overtuned, but honestly, it's not too hard to take out. Like, I've taken out a few Grants in my time, and let's not forget that the Axis do have a lot of good equipment. So it's not like they've got absolutely fuck all. They've got good weapons. It's just that it's just that most people in the player base just don't use it because they're like, oh no, I'm not gonna play it because there's no one playing. But yeah. And also you get Beretta pistols. What's there to hate? And I've got a golden one here, but seriously, you cannot go wrong with a Beretta pistol. I mean, yeah, I've got the gold, and also I've got the golden gun, so yeah. It's really, yeah, I really do like the pistol. It's one of my favourites in the game. Anyways, let's move on to number one, which, if you've seen if you've just been taking notes, you'll know which one's number one. Honestly, Normandy's actually the most balanced campaign. Now, I know everyone's saying, oh, but my Jumbo, but my Panther, but my P47, all of that. I'm like, you realise that there's about 3 counters to all of those on the other side. Jumbo, Tiger, and Panther. As well as a good old Panzerfaust and a Rackenbushel. Tiger and Panther, 76mm Sherman, P47, Piat, M9 bazooka, a lot of things to counter that. P47, fuck a wolf. Or even just use any of the attack planes. I've shot too many P47s to count. And, it's such an easy experience to just shoot down so many planes. But yeah. Honestly, most people go and they're like, oh, this is the most unbalanced campaign. And they generally have no idea what they're talking about. Like, I've maxed both sides. I've maxed both sides in Normandy. I've got about 1,000 games in Normandy. Like, I've got about 1,000 games in Normandy, or close, near enough 1,000 games in Normandy. I'm pretty sure I know I know everything. Now, I know people will be like, oh, but there's weapons which are OP, and I'm like, both sides have that. Both sides have overpowered weapons. The MP43, the FG42, the MG34, the drum for the Axis. The Thompsons, M2 Carbine, and M19 1986 are their counters for the Allies. And, I mean, I've beaten lots of people. I've got a good win rate on both sides. And I've got a positive kit. I've got positive KDs on both sides. It's not hard. And you might be going, but what about the tanks? Well, Jumbo. I've killed countless Jumbos. I've killed these things with... I was killing Jumbos with Stern Pistols when people were saying the Stern Pistol was a useless anti-tank weapon. Like before... I was killing Jumbos with Stern Pistols before the Stern Pistol got buffed. The 76... P47, they're all counterable. I mean, look at this. The Focke-Wulf counters almost every Allied aircraft. The Me-410 is a very good aircraft. As well, the Junker 188. I don't use them, but this is another fantastic aircraft. You can even dogfight with these things if you have about 1 billion tail gunners. But this thing has, 4 tail gunners? Yeah, you have 4 tail gunners with this thing. And this thing, you can actually survive in this thing quite well. The Allies, if anything, the Allies actually suffer more in the air than the Axis, because they don't really have anything that can shoot down. Like, they don't have anything with real cannons that can blast down the thing, because most of their stuff is using, Brownings. Obviously, there's H-Fars, which will shred stuff. I mean, this one has a cannon. The late P-38 has a cannon. I mean, the P-38 does actually have a cannon. But, most things, the P-51, you have to crew snipe with these things. You have to literally hit the crew with these, with the P-51s and the, and even stuff like the P-40, the P-38s and the other vehicle, and the, P-50, whatever it was, and the, P-47. It's like, but yeah, obviously, of course, and also, most people will be like, oh, but there's two P-47s as well in the game, but it's like, how many people have the second P-47? I have it because I did the event, right? Firing November was a long time ago. It was almost a year ago at this point. How many people still have the P-47 and don't use the A-20 instead? Honestly, Normandy, for every single overpowered thing, there's about 4 counters to it. Even the FG, which in my opinion isn't even a top 10 weapon in Normandy anymore. Yeah, I actually think the FG-42 isn't even top 10 anymore. The FG-42 is still the most overpowered weapon, but because of its versatility, but it's no longer, the best weapon in Normandy. And yeah, I will admit that the Allies do have some weapons that are very powerful, but so do the Axis. It's like every single powerful weapon gets countered. MP-43. Well, if you get up against a person with a Thompson, they're going to shred you. You try and engage someone with a 1919A6 or BAR, they're going to shred you. And then on the plus side, with the 1919A6, if you get literally approached at very close range with this thing, you will most likely be killed, because you've got, unless you spam fire from the hip, you'll probably end up being killed. As well as that, the Axis LMGs have better rates of fire, like the MG34 and the 42. Yeah, honestly, name a weapon in Normandy, or a tank, or anything that's considered OP in Normandy, and there's counters to it. Even the Tiger. I've seen Stuarts take down Tigers. That's not even a joke. The Stuart can kill a Tiger. I'm not even jesting with this. But yeah, and also with the Tiger, there's it's very easy to kill, and you can even and it's very easy to knock out by just hitting the gun. But yeah, most people just don't know this. Anyways, I'm going to end this video here. I've been ranting quite a bit, but yeah, I just, honestly, I think that Normandy is probably the most balanced campaign, and I know everyone's like, oh, it's explosion hell, or it's all of that, but it's like, you realise that even though it is explosive heli, it's still more balanced than Moscow. Like, neither side gets a real advantage, and if a side does have an advantage, it's short-lived. Like, for example, I'm just going to go back onto the campaign tree. The Allies don't get a good SMG until level 22, but they have good LMGs, they've got good aircraft, and they have arguably much better aircraft. And they get a better grenade launcher, and they get earlier access to the M1 carbine, and they get decent tanks. Whereas the Axis, yeah, they get better SMGs and, probably comparable rifles, but, they get much worse LMGs. The BF-109 is not that good. And, they don't really... Yeah, they get the Yonker 188, but then... as soon as they really get, the Allies get... But then the Allies get their advantage back by getting the Jumbo and their actual first LMG, but then the Axis get an advantage with the FG. So, the balance switches. The Allies level the playing field on the weapons. They've got a better tank. but the Axis have the FG-42, which outclasses the M2 in most regards, other than close range. And then later on, they get stuff, the Axis. It's kind of like it's kind of constantly shifting with who's stronger in which area, which is what I like about Normandy. It's like, honestly, yeah, like, each side shifts and balances. Like, the Allies get better fighters in the early game, but then the Axis gets the best fighter in the late game. The Allies probably get a really good fighter bomber. In comparison, the Axis get a better bomber. And it's kind of like shifting the balance. The Allies get really good SMGs, whereas the Axis get more medium range options to counteract this. And it's like, the Axis get better tanks, but the Allies have probably, on average, better planes. And ground play just really is depending on your playstyle. Like, if you're really close range, if you love long range and you've got late war allies, then you're not going to do as well if you had it with Axis. But if you prefer close range fights, like myself, and you use Axis, you're probably going to be better with long range late game allies, because they're just much better at close range, especially with stuff like the M2 and the M1A1. But yeah, I'm actually going to end this video here. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you're, obviously I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to join the Discord, link's going to be in the description. And I'll see you guys in the next video.